keto and crime and thought crime, it's time. It's time for our delve into the world of televangelists. This is going to be fun. I'm going to count down several of my favorite televangelists, not because I necessarily like them, just because they entertain me so much. So we're going to talk about the origins of televangelism, the type of theology that most of them preach, and then we're going to talk about them themselves. So it's going to be fun. This is going to be at least 2 to 3 parts, maybe more. So I'll get them out as quickly, one after the other, as I can. Still in Chattanooga. This is our last week. The next time I film will be back at home in my normal setting. So again, behind us in our little separate room here, you can see my coffee cup in the background. Not going to move it because this is real stuff. I want to thank everyone for all the great comments. You seem to be really enjoying the last few videos. I really enjoy bringing this stuff to you. And with that being said, a huge shout out to my patrons and my channel members. If you would like to join them, those links are below. Also, share, like, comment. If I haven't earned your subscription, I hope today is the day that I do. I have a goal for 2021. By December 31st, 2021, I would like to have this channel grown to 10,000 subscribers. I think it's possible. So if you want to join, we have a lot of fun. Please subscribe, share, bring other people over. It would be great. Anyway, I hope we can reach that goal, and with your help, I know that we can. And with that being said, let's jump into televangelists.
Birds propel, eagles don't propel. We say, oh God, 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 oh God.
The Old Testament, and in the Living Bible it says that white hair is the crowning glory and is seen most amongst the godly.
I think we're all aware of what a televangelist is. It's essentially a minister, usually the pastor of a larger-than-life church called a megachurch, which is just a lot of people that are nationally syndicated. You see them all over the airwaves. They write books. They have radio shows. They have television shows. They have huge YouTube followings. So that is the type of televangelist we're going to talk about. We're not going to get into your smaller regional players. I know there's quite a few of those, but we're going to deal with the national, international big ones that we all know. But before we get into the actual list of televangelists we'll talk about, let's talk about what kind of gospel do these televangelists preach, at least 90% of them. And honestly, it can be broken down into 2 words: prosperity gospel. That is it's kind of a melding of your basic inspirational, motivational speakers and gospel, usually in the Pentecostal realm. In fact, the two, based on studies by cultural anthropologists, actually merged sometime around the 1930s and 40s. The whole motivational speaker, prosperity sentiment of the 1920s kind of merged with Pentecostalism around the 30s, 40s, and into the 50s it really took off. So these are the actual cultural studies on that. So that's when they merged together. But what exactly is the prosperity gospel? Basically, the prosperity gospel, also known as the prosperity theology, preaches health, wealth, gospel of success, based on a seed of faith. That's it in a nutshell. It's basically very popular among Protestant Christians that say that financial blessings and physical well-beings are all in the will of God for all that follow Him and all that pursue Him. And that faith, that little mustard seed of faith, kind of combined with positive thought, positive speech, think Tony Robbins, you're doing your daily affirmations, that sort of thing. And most of all, generosity toward your church, or specifically your televangelist of choice, will increase one's material wealth. The seeds of motivational speaking and just prosperity mindset can be traced back to the 19th century, late 19th century, to Andrew Carnegie and the book that he wrote, Gospel of the Wealth. So this is very much tied to the robber barons. Remember, your Carnegies, your Rockefellers, your Vanderbilts, those people. This is very tied to their look at unfettered capitalism and your ability and freedom to pursue your own happiness. I mean, that's written in the Constitution, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So these people equated happiness with money and wealth. And so they started becoming your very first motivational authors, motivational speakers. And then you had more other motivational speakers come along. And then you had the Baptist minister E.W. Kennan in the early 1900s, who was a minister, graduate of Emerson College, follower of the Higher Life movement, that took those motivational writings, those motivational speakers, those motivational affirmations, and brought it into the newly burgeoning Pentecostal church and combined the two. Instead of it just being positive thinking, hard work, which is the cornerstone of just motivational speaking in general, it became positive thoughts, faith in God, generosity toward God or your church, as well as positive thoughts, hard work, equal wealth, because God wants you to have it, and it's promised to all Christians. So you start seeing a secular thing, motivational speaking, combined with religion. Need I say more? And this caught on, and people started believing this way. And not only did you have people believing that God wanted them to be wealthy, you had people getting wealthy, namely the ministers that preach this shit. They're the ones that got wealthy. But anyway, that's when you started seeing Pentecostalism and motivational prosperity theology meld. But what was their justification for it? How did they sell the gospel of Jesus Christ, who is, without much debate, somebody that gave up all worldly wealth to go out and preach to the lost? By definition, how does this theology of pursuit of material wealth, how do you justify that with the actual gospel of Jesus Christ? Several ways. Let's talk about it. By cherry picking of scriptures, mostly. Let's look at some of the famous scriptures, both Old and New Testament, that are used to justify this prosperity theology. Malachi 3, chapter 10, bring all you tithes into the storehouses, that there may be meat in mine house. Improve me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts. If I will not open you to the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing, there shall not be enough room to receive it. So basically, Prophet Malachi talking about generous giving to the clergy for furthering the kingdom of God. And probably the most famous one in the New Testament that's used to justify this is Matthew 25:14-30, the parable of the talents. Basically, this is one where a master left his house, entrusted his property to his servants according to their abilities. So this is like, contributing according to your income. 3 servants, 8 talents was given among them. He had, the first one was given 5, the second one 2, and the third received only 1. Upon returning, the master took an account of how they had grown or taken care of his money. And the first and the second service explained that they each put their talents to work. They started a business, they started doing other things, and doubled everything that their master had given them. Then when he said, well done, good and faithful servant. And then when he talked to the third had simply buried it in the ground and gave back every part. Well, he was very mad because according to this, that God gives you kind of a stewardship opportunity by blessing you with the ability to work. So you should give as much of that back to God as you possibly can, and God will reward you. So those are the major scriptures that are used to justify this. And you can see that the main part of both of these scriptures is give to the church. And there's also a few others, John 10:10, I am come that they might have life and they might have it more abundantly. Philippians 4:19, my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. And 3 John 1:2, beloved, I wish above all things that thou must prosper and be in health, even though thy soul prospereth. So these are the passages that kind of justify, health, good health, long life. And that's where the faith healing part of, Pentecostalism fits right in with this theology. So as you can see, it's kind of cherry picking. If you read the scriptures around those, you see it's a very different story, but these are very often what's used to justify it. Now, so America caught on to this. America loved it. You had Norman Vincent Peale, a very popular minister in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, an author that started writing about this. In fact, Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father, huge follower of Norman Vincent Peale. So you can say that perhaps prosperity gospel helped build the Trump fortune. So I'm just saying that this was very popular among early Americans, especially when capitalism was becoming unfettered. You got to remember that in the 1920s to the 1950s, you had a very unique situation. You had World War I and World War II in very close succession, and then them ending with most of Europe and some of Asia destroyed during it. So their entire economy was destroyed, and that's where you saw the rise of the American Rust Belt. So you had, and the American robber barons, you had a lot of prosperity because America was in a very advantageous spot in that it wasn't destroyed. So industry flourished in Canada and the United States, and because at the time transportation costs were huge. So going to another country where labor costs might be a tenth of what they are in the United States would not equal savings when kind of drawn against the cost of transportation. So America prospered. And so because of the prosperity of, the baby boomer generation, essentially, prosperity gospel really took off during that time period. And because they really felt that they were blessed by their creator at that time. And then as times change, transportation costs lower, then we see a shift. But the remnants of that still abide in the United States today. So with that being said, let's talk about our first televangelist, shall we? And his name, Oral Roberts.
As we start to pray, we're asking you, our friend watching through television, to join us as these are joining us here in the Big Tent Cathedral. We want your compassion, your prayers. We want you to open your heart and help us pray. And pray for yourself. You may need a healing. And if you would like us to pray with you personally, you just write us.
Even though I would like to say that he and his twin brother, Anal, were born, that's not the case. I know that's an old Louis Grisard joke, but that is one of my favorites. Oral, who in their right mind names their child Oral? I'm just saying. And then he chose to go by the name. But unfortunately, he didn't have much of a chance because his full name is Granville Oral Roberts. But he was born January 24th, 1918. In Pontotoc County, Oklahoma. He was the fifth child of a Reverend Ellis Melvin Roberts and Claudia Priscilla Roberts. He was almost half Cherokee, and he was also, as part of his family, was card-carrying members of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, so he had huge ties to the Native Americans. Roberts was pretty much... came from a family of sharecroppers. They were destitute. He nearly died of tuberculosis at age 17 because the family didn't have money for medicine. He did manage to finish high school, and that's when he decided to follow in his father's footsteps and become a minister. He studied for 2 years at Oklahoma Baptist University and Phillips University, and then in 1938, at the age of 20, he married preacher's daughter Evelyn Bostock, and they remained married their entire lives. Though he did complete several years of college, he did not get a degree, but he became ordained as a Baptist minister, but then kind of gravitated into the burgeoning Pentecostal movement, and there are many denominations within the Pentecostal movement, but he just basically was an interdenominational preacher. He started guest preaching at a lot of different churches around the South and Southwest United States, and realized that there was more money in having his own outfit, because as a traveling evangelist, he would, guest spot at different churches, and he would hold revivals, and then he would get literally a cut of whatever contributions were collected during those visits. But then the host church would also get a cut. So he realized he could increase his profit by cutting out the middleman, that host church. So he, after going around from church to church, became quite popular. So he decided to basically collect all the funds by actually starting to do what became a very popular practice in the 1950s. He basically formed his own caravan. He hired his own staff. He bought tents. He bought something like 3,000 folding chairs, and he would go out and just rent land near a small town, or just go out to, public land where he didn't have to have a permit. He would set up his tents. He would put up homemade signs and go around and visit people in the town, because that was just kind of a common thing that happened, especially in rural America, and advertise his revival. And people would come. Churches would bring their entire congregations, and guess what? He still took up a love offering, and he got to keep 100% of it. So he became quite wealthy doing this for over 20 years. He said he credits this to opening up his Bible in one day in 1947 and have it open to the third epistle of John, where he read verse 2, where it said, "Thou mayst prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers." So he was one of the ones that introduced 3 John into the mix, verse 2 into the mix. So he said he took that as a sign, and he began his traveling ministry that day by going out and buying a Buick. After he got in that Buick, God appeared to him and told him to start healing the sick. So he became one of the most popular traveling faith healers of its time, as well as some prosperity in there, give to me and you'll prosper kind of thing. In 1955, he held a very highly televised healing campaign in Johannesburg, South Africa. It was during apartheid, so basically it was not a easy place to be, you can say that, with a goal of converting 1,000 souls, both white and black, to Christ. And it was quite a success. He collected hundreds of thousands of dollars and left behind a very generous endowment of $37,000, less his expenses to continue his good work in South Africa by hiring local ministers to continue. He also started running direct mail campaigns. Like I said, this is in the early days of television, so he would mail out his informational packets to poor Americans, and particularly minorities, and ask for a love gift for God to bless them, and they would send the money to them. I actually heard, I watched a documentary about televangelists, and there was a young one that was, he was a child evangelist in the 70s. But he actually said that another minister told him that if you send out a mailer asking for $20, a $20 love gift, somewhere out there's a poor old woman or a poor old man that has $20 in a cookie jar, and they're going to feel inspired to send that. So he said if you can get 10 people to do that, that's $200 in your pocket, minus postage. So, yeah, pretty scummy as far as how it treats people, but also pretty brilliant when it comes to making money and having a successful career, I suppose. 1963, he returned to his home state of Oklahoma and founded Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you saw my video on John Allen Chau, I'll link it here. You saw my whole thought process of the Oral Roberts University. It's a fundamentalist Christian university. Once had a medical school where John Allen Chau's father actually received his medical degree and where John Allen Chau attended as well, but it's highly embedded in the prosperity gospel and the Pentecostal movement. It was chartered as a private Christian university. It requires all new students to sign an honor code pledging not to smoke, drink, or engage in premarital sex activities. They opened a prayer tower, which became a huge church draw for the local Oklahoma City area in 1967. He also became the first televised televangelist. His crusades were broadcast nationally. And he also founded his own broadcasting company known as Golden Eagle Broadcasting in 1996, which he broadcasted not only his crusades, but crusades from some of the other popular televangelists of the day. So Oral Roberts, pretty popular dude, but let's talk about some of his scandals, shall we? In 1977, probably the thing he's most well known of is a vision of a 900-foot tall Jesus over Oklahoma City, in which he was commanded to build the City of Faith Medical and Research Center, and that the hospital would be a success. And he started a drive, and this culminated in begging for $8 million to complete the project in 1987, or God would call him home. He said God appeared to him and told him that he had 30 days, the month of March, 1987, to raise $8 million. And somehow he did it. Yeah, there was a very rich believer that contributed about half of that. But he was able to complete it and did not die. However, the City of Faith Medical and Research Center was a huge failure. I don't understand why a faith healer wants to start a hospital. But can't you just walk through there and zap people? Well, I'm just saying. But in any way, it failed, and now it still sits there as a monument to Christian consumerism in Oklahoma City, and with its giant praying hands, and is actually is rented out as corporate office space to various businesses in Oklahoma City. Yeah. Some of his children still continue the ministry today. Word of Faith is still around. And in 2009, just before his death, at the age of 91, the Oklahoma Senate passed a resolution honoring the life of Oral Roberts because, let's face it, he brought a lot of money and revenue into Oklahoma. And he was elected to the Oklahoma Academy of Broadcasters Hall of Fame just a month before he died in 2009. So that's Oral Roberts. Now, we're going to come forward into the modern era just a little bit to Kenneth Copeland, born December 6, 1936, in nearby in Oklahoma's neighbor to the west, Texas. He's probably one of the most well-known televangelists around. A huge prosperity gospel ministry and broadcasting system in which he co-hosts with his wife, Gloria. And they both preach. They preach this very prosperity gospel. He basically works off the rule of 100 folds. He says that anything you donate to his ministry will come back to you 100-fold in money, wealth, health, all that good stuff. He made headlines in the mid-2000s for saying that he could not fly commercial because it was like being stuck in a tube of demons. Yeah, he actually said that. I'm going to play a clip for you right here.
About why you don't want to fly commercial. Why have you said that you won't fly commercial? You said that it's like getting into a tube with a bunch of demons. Why do you think that?
No, listen to me just a second. Not the people. The main reason is because of the need. If I flew commercial, I'd have to stop 65% of what I'm doing. That's really the main.
But anyway, he spent lavishly from what his his parishioners send him. He has a broadcasting company, a huge ranch, several houses across the United States, and a $65 million private jet that he uses to jet around to do God's work. Probably, though, he's most well known for his stance on vaccines. He has taken a stance against vaccinations of all sorts, saying that it does cause autism, something that has been pretty well debunked. And his daughter, Terry Copeland Pearson's church, was actually the site of a measles outbreak in 2013, where 21 people, members of her church that had bought into the whole anti-vax thing, contracted the illness, brought back to them by a recent parishioner who had been a missionary in Indonesia. And so as a result, they got the measles, y'all. Basically, Kenneth Copeland is preaching a mixed message. He kind of went to vaccines for a little while after that, but then went back to his original beliefs in just vitamin supplements, of course, which he sells to cure everything. He actually said that coronavirus would end or would soon end in a famous televised sermon that you can find anywhere on YouTube. He talks about a healing wind being blown on you to blow away the coronavirus, and he does this to his congregation, and that cured it. COVID's just gone, thanks to Kenneth Copeland. But yeah, that's the kind of person Kenneth Copeland is. I highly advise not watching him, not sending him any money, and certainly don't take medical advice from him. Please. And with that, we're going to move on to our third televangelist, with Jesse Duplantis, a good friend of Kenneth Copeland. He was born July 9th, 1949 in New Orleans, Louisiana. He is a good friend of Kenneth Copeland, as I said, founder of the Christian Evangelical Charismatic Movement. He actually founded a movement. So he's a faith healer / motivational speaker that kind of acts like a redneck as a shtick. I'm going to actually drop a clip here.
I never thought she'd ever see a dead chicken running around with his head cut off. But we bought this little house kind of on this lonely street, and I had this guy that was a fruitcake live next door to me, nuts. And he kept a duck. He had a duck. It was a demon-possessed duck, too. It was related to that chicken that died years ago. You'd look at that duck and you'd go,
said, and he was actually the one that Kenneth Copeland uttered those famous words on camera about airplanes and demons. So we know that Duplantis believes in his own private jet. He actually preached his first sermon in 1976. He was introduced to another televangelist on our list, John Hagee, as an apostle of joy on Trinity Broadcasting Network. If you're not aware of Trinity Broadcasting Network, please go watch some of it right now. It is hilarious. It is an offshoot from Jim Bakker's Praise the Lord PTL Club. Their flagship show is actually called Praise the Lord, up until recently hosted by some very kooky people. But Jesse Duplantis is a regular on Trinity Broadcasting Network, and so was Hagee. So they became friends. He, as I said, founded an entire Christian Evangelical Charismatic Movement, and he also founded his own ministries, Jesse Duplantis Ministries. He has headquarters in America, branches in the United Kingdom and Australia. So yes, the United States is not the only country to fall for this stuff. He believes in the prosperity gospel. The more money you give, the more time you give, more comes back to you as a result. Now, Hagee received national headlines when he became one of the first directors of Christians United for Israel. This is a John Hagee organization, which basically kind of gathers money for the country of Israel, because many evangelical Christians believe that Israel is going to play a huge part in the second coming of Christ or the end of the world, i.e. Chad Daybell's novels. And he was the first state director for Louisiana. So he definitely believes, like Hagee, because when we get to Hagee, you're going to realize that they're doom and gloom in addition to prosperity, because they believe that the end of the world is nigh. In fact, they believe so much in the prophecies surrounding Israel that they are actually trying to make those come true. So we can kind of deal with either some pretty sick people here or some people that are just trying to force prophecies to come true. I'm not exactly sure which. But he also believes that ministers should have private jets, no problem, and that ministers have a right to wealth just like anyone else because they give so much of themselves. Outside of his Israel shenanigans and his dealings with Kenneth Copeland, not a whole lot of controversy in Duplantis' life outside of just being plain weird, as you saw in the clip that I played for you. So Duplantis, and if you can watch him and just laugh like I do, yeah, it's worth a view. But otherwise, please don't put any stake into what he says. And from Duplantis, we're going to go into probably one of the most influential televangelists of all times, and to me, one of the most twisted, Pat Robertson. Born March 22nd, 1930, he is not only a televangelist and a very popular preacher, he's also a media mogul. Think Ted Turner, but with miracles and God. He founded CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, as well as its long-standing flagship, the 700 Club, which raises tons of money on its own. He's also a founder of that new charismatic movement, and he created, again, just like Oral Roberts, his own university, Regent University, which has everything from a law school to a school of political science to your basic ministerial studies. He is quite wealthy, and he also is very active in politics, leading up to a failed 2004 presidential run. Thank his God for that. But Robertson was not a lifelong believer. He actually did not become a Christian until he passed through some difficult times later in life. He graduated near the top of his class in Yale Law School. In 1955, he failed the New York bar exam, however, and it cost him any chance of employment. And he was embarrassed. He was at his lowest moments, and that's where he found Jesus and became a minister. He believes in the prosperity gospel. He dumps everything, all revenue from his ministry, his books, into building his own empire. He has founded not only CBN, but he also found ABC Family Channel before ABC purchased it. Regent University, American Center for Law and Justice, which is a conservative Christian think tank political organization, and the International Family Entertainment Incorporated, which is a media watchdog. He also is a huge proponent of the ever-popular Christian Coalition, which began in the 1980s as a serious part of the Republican voting bloc. So that's the reason you see evangelical Christians so tied up in politics, is because of A. Pat Robertson and B. Jerry Falwell Sr., which we will talk about later. He does believe in faith healing. He does heal you through the media waves, prayers on 700 Club every night, which, yes, he still hosts. He also gives advice to people calling in, and I'm about to play a clip where he advises a man or a person writing in on behalf of a male friend of hers to divorce his wife who has Alzheimer's because his wife is no longer there. I'm going to drop this clip.
Alzheimer's. His answer was such a surprise that immediately everyone started taking sides. ABC's Terry Moran has a deeper look for us.
It was a question on the 700 Club, Pat Robertson's talk show. A woman looking for moral guidance asking about a friend whose wife has Alzheimer's.
He says that he should be allowed to see other people because his wife, as he knows her, is gone.
Robertson, an ordained Baptist minister for 50 years, responded.
I know it sounds cruel, but if he's going to do something, he should divorce her and start all over again. But
some of his major controversies have been demonizing other religions, literally calling them spawns of Satan, Islam, Hinduism, name it. He condemns homosexuality and abortion, calling Planned Parenthood the harbor of bestiality, homosexuality, and lesbianism. I don't get that connection, but okay, because we don't reproduce. But probably one of the most best things he's known for is his beliefs that natural disasters such as 9/11, or disasters in general, 9/11, hurricanes, tsunamis, are caused by homosexuals. If we had that power, Pat, you wouldn't still be here. I'm just telling you. And he actually has had business dealings with former president of Liberia and convicted war criminal Charles Taylor and former Zaire president Mobutu Seko, both hugely criticized for their violations of human rights, but yet he does business with them. And his just general disconnect from reality. If you want to see some very funny compilations, go Google Pat Robertson on YouTube. Go search for him on YouTube. You'll find some quite hilarious stuff. And in addition, he has predicted the end of the world several times. 1982, 2011, all failed. And he was actually awarded a mock Nobel Prize for teaching the world to be careful when making mathematical assumptions and calculations. I think that's hilarious. But as a result, so a lot of people call him a false prophet. I don't know if I call him a false prophet. I don't necessarily believe in prophets, but I do believe he is a shyster. So definitely beware of Pat Robertson. And with that, I'm going to end part 1 of my dive into Televangelist. I'll be back really soon with parts 2, 3, 4, whatever it takes to get through this list. I hope you're enjoying it. I really am. And until next time, keep on crying.